Welcome back to Undo Unplugged. I'm Erin Harris, founder and executive director of Undo Mindset and a former educator of 15 years.
And I'm Darren Norris, a licensed psychologist and the sole owner-operator for Flying Pig Psychotherapy, which is based in Parker, Colorado. I specialize in treating adult individual clients, often with a military or law enforcement background. So if you're new here, this podcast is all about practical strategies and inspiring stories to help shift mindsets, foster positive thinking, and unlock true potential.
Yeah, and this season, we're exploring Raising Minds, a journey through K-12 mental health, where we'll be diving deep into the challenges students face at every single stage of their educational career and how us as their support system can really help to make a difference.
So in this series, we'll hear from incredible voices sharing their experiences, insights, and strategies to help students thrive. Let's go ahead and get into it. So today, this episode, Educators on the Front Lines, we're focusing on the critical role that teachers and coaches play in shaping the mental health and well-being of their students, from creating inclusive classroom environments to fostering resilience through sports and extracurriculars. We'll hear from an educator who's out there making a real difference.
Yeah, we'll also explore all the different challenges they're facing, whether it's lack of resources, funding, what is working well, what's not working so great in our educational system, and then practical strategies that we can implement in our own classrooms or our communities. So let's go ahead and let's get into it. We're thrilled to welcome our special guest for this episode, Brooke Patterson, a true powerhouse in the world of education and mental health. With over 20 years of experience as a board-certified music therapist, Brooke has worked with kids, teens, and adults, bringing creativity and compassion to her work. She's also a canine assistant intervention specialist and a certified psychedelic therapy and integration practitioner. Personally, Brooke is a Colorado native who loves fly fishing, horseback riding, hiking, and fostering shelter dogs. She shares her home with her partner, 3 children, 3 bearded dragons, 1 hedgehog, 2 frogs, and 5 dogs. Yep, 5 dogs. Brooke, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Very passionate about the topic.
We're so excited to hear your insight, really understand how educators can support students in their mental health in meaningful ways. So for those of who are maybe new to the programming, I'm on a mission to really destigmatize the human experience. It's really liberating to not feel some type of way for your most human things. So Brooke, if you don't mind, what's one human thing that happened to you this week that you would like to share with us and the listeners? If you would like, I can give you an example because I always think it's best to do this with an example. So one of my most human things is that I was actually pulled over by my husband's coworker, and he is a police officer, so super embarrassing to get pulled over by his coworker.
Excellent.
Do you want to share one of your most human experiences? I'm on a mission to #BeHuman.
Yes, I was almost late to work this morning because one of my dogs threw up on the floor, and at 6:30 in the morning, I got out of bed and stepped in it with my bare feet and got puke all over my feet. So does that count as a very human
totally
experience?
Counts. That was a great one. Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and let's get started. So let's start identifying some students in distress. Let's think through what that looks like. So what are some of the most common signs that you've noticed that indicate a student might be struggling emotionally or academically?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question because sometimes it's not always easy to spot. So as I was processing through how to answer this, one of the big things that came to mind was it's not always easy to see. So sometimes we'll see internalizing behavior. So sometimes we'll see students get really quiet. They might withdraw. They might come in really late or sometimes even really early, like trying to leave home and come to school a little bit early. So sometimes even like changing routines. Sometimes we'll see externalizing behaviors though. So students who are having a lot of difficulty self-regulating or co-regulating with peers, we might see explosive behaviors. Sometimes we'll see students even become overly nice or overly compliant in order to make friends because they're feeling really lonely or sort of out of the group. We'll see students become overly emotional, have friendship difficulties, sometimes difficulties with staff, sometimes non-compliance. Sometimes we'll see even somatic concerns, so tummy aches, injuries, claims of not feeling well. A lot of times our kids who are struggling with trauma, though, do have somatic experiences. So it's really important to be aware of that and take that into consideration as well. So it really kind of runs the gamut of what we can see in students, which is why it's really important to know your kids.
I also, Brooke, if I could just sum up exactly what you said in one phrase that really resonated with me as an educator, is that their nonverbal communication is absolutely a form of communication. Yes. Their behavior is a form of communication. Right. Oftentimes they seek what they are lacking in their home supports areas. And so, absolutely. We should be paying attention to all of their various ways of communicating that they are struggling for sure. So can you share maybe like a specific time when you noticed a student was in distress and how you responded?
Yes. I see this frequently. As a special educator, I see students across the board with a variety of impacts. But I also see students who are twice exceptional and gifted as well as high achievers. So I had a student who was a great kid, really high grades, very high achiever. We closed up school for the end of the day and lights were turning off and we heard something in the bathroom. And this student who was on the honor roll, great grades, great attendance, was hiding in the bathroom at the end of the day. No reason for us to ever consider anything was even wrong. But she was internalizing her behavior so much so that she did not want to go home at the end of the day. We found her hiding in the bathroom, not wanting to go home because school is her safe place, even if people weren't here. So the physical building was her place to keep herself contained and safe. We responded very gently and asking those hard questions, giving her an opportunity to regulate herself, figuring out what was going on. And of course, following the proper steps if and when we consider something is going on at home. But again, it's not always easy to see. We were all shocked that it was this particular student that was demonstrating this behavior. But again, that's where it comes down to knowing our kids.
I love that you gave an example of a student that's high achieving, because I think that so often it's like really easy to identify some of our very, some kids that are in distress. You don't have to be a specialist or an expert to be like, that kid's in distress, right?
Yes.
But, I always say I came from a very privileged childhood. And actually my father once said to me, like, you got everything you want. You couldn't possibly have any trauma. Right. And it's like this idea that if you come from a privileged childhood or you have certain access to things, that you don't then also still have trauma and challenges and all these other things. And then I think also, like, for me, I always just kind of, was like the girl in the background who was complacent and just like doing what was expected of me and like never showed those signs and symptoms as much of a red flag as maybe some other kids. So I really loved and appreciated that example, Brooke. Thank you.
So another question comes up, like, how do you balance assessing the students' like individual needs, emotional needs, while also maintaining your boundaries as an educator, potentially even an administrator?
Sure. Yeah. And this is such an important question because educator burnout is so prevalent these days. I think this is different with every student, which again really drives home the point of having individual relationships with our students. But it also needs to be established as a community. So I think that having set classroom norms that students themselves create and agree upon as a community, and then we model that. So collaborative decision-making helps with student buy-in. And so when students create their own boundaries, when they create their own systems, it really creates a system that kind of runs itself so that it breaks down that power differential so that we are in this together versus my boundaries, your boundaries.
It's inclusive of all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And students can support each other. When they create the rules, they hold each other accountable. And so therefore, it's not all on me as an adult or an administrator in the building. And it creates a very restorative environment so that when a boundary is broken, the students are all on board to be in that with each other. Also, one of the things that I'm really a big believer in is like, if this, then this kind of language. And so having a contingency already set up. So if this happens, if this is a rule that is broken, or if this is a norm, or if this is an agreement that's broken, kids know automatically what the outcome would be. I actually don't use the word consequence. I use the word outcome so that they can identify that I'm not bad. They don't internalize what happens next, but they have a realization that there's an impact on their community.
They want that structure too.
Yes,
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, Brooke, but in those classrooms that I have seen where there is no accountability, there's no is then that, and they don't have these boundaries and there's these structures, the kids are actually, I would say, mental health wise in not as good of a place because there's no predictability. I think all humans thrive on that structure.
Well, and when they have an opportunity to, we call it voice and choice in the classroom, right? When students have an opportunity to voice what they are needing and wanting, again, it comes back to the fact that the community runs itself. And it creates a healthy classroom environment.
I really like that.
The other thing I was just thinking about as well is role modeling. I think is also something that when I was in the classroom, I relied on, where even to the point, like talking about boundaries, I would go put myself in, timeout. We would call it take a break. But I would, if I got overstimulated and I could tell like I wasn't here cognitively online, I'm here in fight, flight, freeze, and I'm dysregulated and I might say something I might regret or do something I may regret. I would say, hey, like literally it doesn't matter what age group I taught, whether it was kindergartners or eighth graders, like, hey, I'm going to go take a break. Like, I want to process what I'm thinking. I'm feeling some things. I'm not sure what I want to do right now. I'm going to go sit in that chair for 3 minutes. If you all could just independently work while I get cognitively back online. And that role modeling, I think, really helps to set up a lot of that structure that you're talking about, Brooke, and that community and that culture and the ability to be like just kind of honest and truthful and set boundaries and, be productive in that world.
Well, and also like being willing to apologize, even as a grown up, right? Like I'm not perfect. And so if I create harm with somebody accidentally, and we're talking, not overt harm, but perhaps I said something in a tone that maybe didn't sit well with a student, being able to come back to that student and say, hey, can I just check in with you on how you're feeling about that? And making sure that relationship is still maintained while also holding the boundary.
Did you know at Undo we teach how to apologize, Brooke? Did you know that?
I love Undo so much.
Well, because like really, I think that so often we've been taught to apologize, just kind of like check a box, right? And the purpose of apologizing is, like you said, truly to repair that relationship with that person. And so my goal isn't like in having that repair is never to get to a space of shame where anybody feels shameful for what they did, but really the growth mindset of like, I didn't mean to, going back to like your idea of sorry in the different tones. I always say with my kids, like if I kick you in the shins and I'm like, sorry, I'm checking that box, but do you really feel like I've repaired anything, right?
Right.
Or I could just not say sorry altogether, but I can still repair that relationship. And that's still a sorry in the same way, right? Like if I run and get you ice and I sit with you and I don't know, pet your hair, or I don't know, whatever is like your repair, I can make sure that I'm still like repairing that relationship in those moments. And that's really meaningful. And I think it's super important to name. It's so hard for our adult population to do this work. So starting this as a practice early on is so vital. Not that we should force our kids to say sorry, because I do know there's lots of parents who are like, if my kid's not feeling sorry, I'm not going to make them. I respect that and I get it. But there's still ways to repair and make sure that like kids understand that objective at the end and see that it's not just their worlds. We are impacting, our behaviors impact others.
Well, and when we have kids whose brains are connected relationally and emotionally, that creates a level of safety. And we know that a safe brain, a calm brain, a connected brain is also a learning brain. And that absolutely starts with adults who can model that for kids.
100%.
Yeah.
I do have another question for you here. It's like, how do you incorporate your own mindfulness, taking mental health breaks and such, like when you're in the moment, in the classroom? Any positive examples you can talk about?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a clinician. I'm a licensed professional counselor as well as a teacher. And so I'm very experiential in my work. So I'm really fortunate that in the district that I work in, we have over 30 animal assisted teams. So we have therapy dogs in a number of our buildings. So really helping students kind of think outside of the box. We have a really great outdoor regulation program. We have an outdoor classroom. We have an outdoor greenhouse. So giving students opportunities outside of the classroom, because what that does is that actually helps kids practice real life skills in a generalized setting instead of just a contrived, we're going to do a 30-second mindfulness activity, which I still do. But I really look for ways to be creative so that kids can say, okay, this works for me. Well, this doesn't work for me. Well, this does work for me. And so that they have sort of a menu of choices to start to practice that. So we also do like some very structured mindfulness type things, deep breathing exercises. There's a lot of great YouTube videos. There's some fantastic apps that we can incorporate, kids and their phones, right? Like one and the other. So teaching kids to find what works for them. And I do that by introducing a variety of things. And sometimes at the end of an activity, kids will be like, oh, I hated that one. Sometimes at the end, they're like, can we please do that again? So really finding what brings them peace, what brings them planned mindfulness, and helping them also somatically identify what's happening in their body. I really need a mindfulness activity right now. I need something that's going to create activation to wake up my nervous system versus I'm going to need something more relaxing that's going to bring me down and it's going to help me sort of re-regulate and re-engage. So I'm a very out of the box thinker and I really believe in individualizing those mindfulness practices for my kids.
I love it too. Like just from our last video about like not being prepared for the real life. It's like,
yes,
classroom is classroom. Work and life are two different things, and learning.
Absolutely.
Again, just going outside. Like I tell people all the time, take a break, go outside.
I was just going to add to that one of the things my husband's a police officer and he is a mental health guy. He goes to calls where people are, very much cognitively not online, oftentimes in an unsafe way. Right. And I learned this from him, and I try very hard to kind of express this to as many educators as I can. If you have a kiddo who is cognitively offline, so they are dysregulated in their behaviors, their thoughts, their things they're saying, things like that, think of it as like having tunnel vision. It really does become like a tunnel vision. You don't see the details of all the things around you. You're really just seeing like that anger, that hard emotion.
Yep.
And so what my husband does when he goes to a lot of these hard calls is he will, first thing he does, look at me or look near me, right? I want them to have me in focus and not necessarily something else that's becoming noise. I always say start with getting them cognitively online, get in their vision, really breathe with them. I mean, I've had kids that are like, have autism and really challenge and struggle to like be in the classroom where I will just sit with them on the floor and we just breathe. And I know you're here with me and we're calming down that central nervous system and we can problem solve later, right? Like we can come up with what is that outcome? What is this going to look like later? But if they're not cognitively online, we are not getting anywhere with them.
Can I just respond to that really quickly? I think that, one of the things that I say, well, there's two things that I rephrase a lot. The first one is attention seeking is connection seeking. And so if I have a kid throwing chairs or not listening or doing whatever behavior that's seen as non-compliant, right? There's a reason for that. One of the things that I teach a lot of my private clients is the spoon theory, right? And so we talk about even kids who are not neurodivergent, they have a certain number of spoons every day. Let's say they have 8 spoons and potentially walking through a hallway that's crowded, that has a lot of noise going into it. Okay, we give away a spoon. We have to come in and then we have the stress and the pressure of taking a test. We give away a spoon. And potentially at the end of the day, let's say you're the 6th period teacher and you have kids transitioning, your kiddo might be out of spoons. Mm-hmm. And so what do we need to do to give them some of their spoons back?
I also think the more we can really empower our students to take initiative to do those things needed to fill their, get more of those spoons back, the more we can set them up for success when the big world problems start to happen. So
absolutely.
Okay. So you obviously encounter, you incorporate rather a lot of these skills and strategies and things in your classroom. I'm curious to know, have you seen, what does the impact look like for you? I'm sure you have like a lot of individual stories. Did you start your educational career doing some of these things and now you do them? I can speak for me. I wasn't doing a lot of this until I really took some serious look at my own mental health and got my own help.
Yeah.
And then I went back to the classroom after that. And I was like a totally different teacher because it was just very eye-opening. Tell me about your journey and what kind of outcomes and impacts you've seen.
So I think this kind of talks about like, how do I run my classroom? Is that kind of the question that you're asking?
Have you seen it transform kids to be able to give them these kinds of supports and access?
Yeah, I think that, there's so many kids because I am a special educator as well as a clinician. I have dozens and dozens and dozens of stories of kids that have really transformed. But I think what you're speaking to is this idea that we have to transform ourselves first. We have to be humble enough to come to ourselves as educators and say, okay, what's happening for me interpersonally? What's happening for me emotionally, mentally, cognitively, physically, all of those things. I think when we can self-reflect, we can then get ourselves into a learning brain, into a calm brain, so that we can then connect with our students. It's interesting because, in our class, I was just talking with a 6th grade teacher. As a learning specialist, I go in and support teachers. And she was telling me, she said, you know what? I have only 4 kids out of 28 students that don't have some type of a formal written plan.
So you're saying 4 kids, you would say are
out of a classroom of 28. But Erin, what I think you're talking about, though, is the research does really support the fact that all brains are different learners. And so how do we then as educators work within ourselves to really dive in and meet the needs of our students? But I think it comes down to this. I think it really comes down to having a relationship with your kid, having known intimately who our kids are, what their experiences are. When we create a safe classroom environment through those structures that we talked about earlier, they can really start to engage there. But I think it also comes down to this other part, which is teaching students how to be resilient, how to understand their own experience, and then how to self-advocate for their particular plan. And if they don't have a plan, just for themselves personally. So that's teaching kids, what is my body telling me right now? What is my brain telling me right now? What do I need? Giving them emotional vocabulary to say, I'm overwhelmed. I need a break.
How to be even self-aware though? Like that's a learned skill. And I look at like the adult world and I'm like, wow, we are so not self-aware.
We're not good at it.
No. And so building that within our kids does make them more sensitive, which, can be triggering for some, but also like, I think what you're saying is like, we are able to see the signs and symptoms of some of those hard emotions. Like, ooh, I'm starting to maybe get angry instead of like exploding at my friend right now. That's going to harm that relationship. I'm going to go utilize go take a break or go utilize a coping skill so that I don't, right?
I'll piggyback off of that too. This idea that we give kids an opportunity to self-reflect, but then what do I do? So then that's where the systems and the structure comes into play. So things like having a cozy corner, giving them language to ask for like a reduced length of assignment, or, hey, instead of writing a 6-page paper, can I tell you what I know? Flexible seating, like, hey, it really bothers me when I'm sitting by the door and I can hear all the noise in the hallway. It just kind of like it takes a spoon from me. Can I move to a different spot in the classroom? Breaking assignments down, access to technology. I have a ton of kids who use assistive technology. So even some of those practical things, in addition to the social emotional piece, can really be a beautiful interplay to help kids say, okay, this is what's happening. And this is what I can do next.
Yeah. And then also I'm going to add to that, practice what you preach or practice what you teach as well.
Right.
So I was asking my son some questions today as we were going to school. And I was asking him, what things feel really frustrating in the mental health supports that you have in your school? And he was like, well, people want you to talk when it's on their terms, but like, I'm not ready. And I was like, well, that's really fair, son, because like, if I'm upset with daddy and I need to like collect my thoughts, but daddy is like, come to the office and you're going to talk about it now.
Right now.
I might not be in the right place to do that. But we we tell kids these strategies, but then when it actually comes to practical use, sometimes we forget because we are bogged down with our schedules and our things and that we forget to actually implement and impose and make sure that we're giving them that space to do exactly what we've said is best practice.
All right. So we have, Brooke, one more question for you before we kind of wrap up. If you could change one thing about the educational system, or maybe two, to make it better for like mental health and mental health support, what would that be?
Yeah. So here's where I think we're at. I think all educators enter the field because they care about kids. Their passion is to educate students. It is to better society, one kid at a time. I think schools are doing as good of a job as they can. However, I think the community as a whole, like, widely misperceives how teachers are working with kids, how we're able to work with kids, because the system is so constrictive based on numbers, based on funding, based on sometimes even just a lack of knowledge from teachers, but also a lack of knowledge from the community. So I think that we need more acceptance. We need more love. We need more deconstruction of like the bigotry and the judgment so that we can create communities in schools where all kids belong, that we can create communities within our community, whether that's our classroom community, whether that's our small group communities, whether that's our state, local communities. Because I think right now the current political climate, if I may, I think it really makes an uphill battle to support students' mental health needs, especially with our marginalized communities, our racial minority students who have immigrated to our country, ESL learners, special education students. And so there's really this broad depth of really width and depth of student needs. And to diversify that and to meet the needs of everybody, it takes an incredible amount of resources. So I am a big believer in the investment in our educational system, particularly public education, because that's where the masses are going. And that's where they deserve to be served within their home schools. So we have to really get down to the basics. We have to feed kids. Kids have to come to school rested. They have to come to school knowing that they're going to be safe. We have to make sure that their bellies are full, that their brains are online. We as educators have to make sure that we ourselves are healthy. I think a lot of that continues to be true, even just how buildings are run with administration, but our administrators are exhausted. Our teachers are exhausted. Our special service providers are exhausted. So I think knowing and understanding that this is a very taxing job, it's a very taxing position, and people really are doing the best they can. And so supporting teachers from home, but even if you don't have kids in a school, supporting that through support of funding, come in and volunteer and see what's going on. You know, in my district, we had a big bond and mill levy, and I was blown away at these misperceptions of people on the outside thinking what was happening on the inside. But take some time to get to know your local educator. Take some time to invest in your kids at your local public schools. When we can start to do that, when we can build relationships, we can start to build those bridges. And I think that is when our educational system is going to be better. There are some things that are broken. And I also believe that there are a lot of things that are going well. And people and my colleagues and myself, we are pouring our lives and pouring ourselves and our time into these kids, into your kids, to whomever is listening. And it's important work. And my hope is just that we can continue to value that.
And we're so grateful for folks like you who are doing this work. I miss it dearly. And everything you have said really spoke to me. I do think that I would summarize kind of what, I was listening to you in the challenges, and there's so much to it. But I feel like for me, I would summarize it into everybody thinks they're an expert in education because we all went to school.
Right.
So we have a lot of opinions. When I was in education, I always said that, my market that I am trying to appease is a lot of children, a lot of parents and adults, a lot of peers in my building, and then the community in general. And it's a lot of people to try to really appease. And every person comes to that equation with their own opinions and thoughts on what is right and wrong. And you're trying to be this cook in this kitchen and make it all happen. Yeah. But the truth of the matter is I think we need to trust the educators, that they are actually the ones who know what that recipe is and how to help those kids. And we need to build trust in that system and those people again, for sure.
Well, and I will say too, just the work that Undo is doing, I think it's really important to acknowledge that as well, because we also need partnerships. I, again, am a clinician and I have a private practice, and I see a lot of students who come in who they can sense that their teacher's overwhelmed, or they can sense that the system itself is taxed and they're not necessarily getting what they need individually. And so they come and see me, and then I work with them in that setting. But I think supporting one another, networking, collaborating with organizations like Undo, seeking outside mental health support, there's no shame in that. There's absolutely no shame, because again, when our emotions are regulated, and going back to Maslow's, when our basic needs are met, a healthy brain is a learning brain. And that's how we're going to continue to move our students one by one and our society as a whole forward.
100%.
Awesome.
That was a perfect way to end that, I think. Thank you so much, Brooke, for sharing such valuable insights and strategies with us today. Before we let you go, I'd like to give a quick shout out to the incredible work that you're doing in your clinical practice. If you're local here in Colorado, Brooke is also here locally in the Parker area. So definitely check her out.
Just before we let you go, Brooke, just wanted to ask, if people wanted to reach out to you personally, do you have a business site or a business card or a website or anything that you can share with us?
Yeah, sure. So my practice is focused on mostly teens and adults. I do see some kids, but also supporting parents of students and kids who are neurodivergent. Or people who simply see the world differently and just need a safe place to come and process what that experience is like. My website is inclusivemindscounseling.org, all one word. You can find me on Facebook, Insta, all the things. But I'm here and really look forward to hearing from people. But
can you say the website one more time for us, just in case we missed it?
inclusivemindscounseling.org.
Thank you so much, Brooke. It's been an honor having you on the show, and I'm sure we will chat with you soon. All right. That was great. But unfortunately, we've come to the end. It's time to wrap up, Darren. So looking back, we've explored the incredible roles educators play in supporting our students' mental health, from recognizing the signs of distress to creating inclusive environments and fostering resilience through extracurriculars.
And we shared some actionable strategies like daily check-ins with students, mindfulness breaks, getting outdoors, and building a classroom culture of general openness. These small steps can have a big impact on a student's well-being.
And in closing, Undo would love to hear from you listening to my voice right now. If you've tried any of these strategies or have your own tips, please share them with us on social media using #UndoUnplugged or slide into our DMs. And let's continue this conversation.
Don't forget to tune in next time, where we'll be taking a powerful look at how professional guidance shapes mental health and success. We don't want you to miss it.
Thank you for tuning in to Undo Unplugged. Every student deserves a safe space to grow, learn, and thrive.
And remember, it's never too late to undo your mindset. Until next time, take care.
That was great, but unfortunately, we've come to the end. It's time to wrap it up. Looking back, Darren, we've explored some pretty powerful ways to support student mental health and their well-being.
And we've shared actionable strategies that can make a real difference in the lives of students, educators, and their families. Small steps can lead to big changes.
That's right. And in closing, Undo would love to hear from you. Yes, you listening to my voice right now. If you've tried any of these strategies or have your own tips, share them with us on our social media using #UndoUnplugged or slide into our DMs. Let's keep this conversation going.
Don't forget to tune in next time for more inspiring stories and practical strategies to help shift mindsets and unlock potential. Don't miss out.
Thank you for tuning in to Undo Unplugged. Every student deserves a safe space to grow, learn, and thrive.
And remember, it's never too late to undo your mindset. Until next time, take care.
Bye.